Aaron, welcome to the show.
Hey Vic, thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity.
Excited to have you on here. I love what you're up to. Love what you're doing. I love the whole thing about cash practices, doing things like that in the chiropractic world. That's a big topic we discuss a lot about, just because what's going on with the insurance world and all that. But excited to dive into what we were chatting about here. And as my listeners know, before we get into all the good stuff, I always love to know, how did you get into what you're doing? What's your story? What's the journey that took you to where you are today?
Yeah, it was I don't know, like a 10, 12-year journey, but it's been, I started PT as an adult. So I graduated college. I was kind of an adult, but, not responsible. Spent a year out of the country, then so I lived in Israel for a year. I moved back to the United States and was like, I'm moving to California, landed out there, slept on a couch for 6 weeks on the porch in the rain. Finally got like a temp job, a bunch of jobs that sucked. And I ended up as a bike messenger. Well, I had been exposed to massage therapy in college from racing bikes. And, I had this epiphany one day. I was like, oh, if I go to massage therapy school, I can go to school for 4 hours a day. I'll eventually work 4 hours a day and be able to race bikes, because racing bicycles was my passion. And I'd been pre-med, but I decided organic chemistry wasn't for me. So I kind of like got off the path and got back into the path of working in working with people's bodies, doing healing through massage therapy. After a few years of doing that, patients just kept telling me, Aaron, you're the first person ever to touch me where I hurt, or the first person to actually ever help me. I've been to chiropractors, massage therapists, PTs, acupuncture, et cetera, and no one's touched me where I hurt. And then they would say, now, when am I going to get better? I'm like, I don't know when you're going to get better, because as a massage therapist, you're not trained to give a prognosis. So my wife encouraged me to go back to PT school, and I did that when I was 34. We had moved back out of California, back to North Carolina, bought a house, got married, both went back to school, had a baby, and then started a cash practice right after school. Did that for a few years. People said, Aaron, how'd you do this? And I told them. And then no one ever said thank you, until one day this woman said, well, how much do I owe you? And I said, I don't know. And that started my coaching and consulting business. So that's the short, 3-minute answer.
Love it. Now, what inspired you to start a cash practice right off the bat, especially in the physical therapy world?
I think there were a couple things. I went into PT thinking, all right, great. I'll be a PT. I'll be a doctor of physical therapy. I'll get out and I'll have some respect, or at least, be able to, decide how my patients were treated. And I quickly realized on my first clinical rotation, I saw 43 patients one day. In one day, I saw 43 patients. And I realized that day, I can't treat patients the way that I knew they need to be treated in a traditional physical therapy model, because I'd already been working in massage therapy for 7 years, people telling me they had already been to PT. They were doing things that they could do at home. No one touched them where they hurt, and they weren't getting better. And that's not everyone, but that's the people I was seeing. And I knew there was this big segment of people that were being underserved. And so how was I going to do anything different? And so I thought, well, if I'm already charging $85 an hour doing massage or body work, why wouldn't I charge even just $10 more an hour now that I'm Dr. LeBauer? But there was no existing model for out-of-network or cash-based practice in PT. So I had to use my experience doing massage therapy to just say, hey, look, I'm going to charge a little bit more, call myself Dr. LeBauer. It's now LeBauer Physical Therapy, and see what happens. And it ended up working.
That's awesome. I think because just, I know my experience in chiros I work with and talk to and colleagues and so forth, insurance is just a nightmare and a headache and all that stuff. For the listeners who don't understand that stuff, and use your insurance, trust us, we go through a lot of headaches if we use it. But it's one of the things where you don't hear about too much with the cash practice side in the PT world. That's what intrigued me. I was like, wow, okay, cash practice on the PT side. But I love it though. So what is it like? You're just real quick, if you don't mind me asking, the process you take a client through.
Yeah. So you mean our patients in our clinic, or clients for?
I'm sorry. Yeah. Just in the clinic side, is it just normal PT or is there other things you incorporate?
Yeah. So physical therapy has this really broad definition. And as physical therapists, we've been really bad at defining what we do. And, because we can do things like like wound care, and we can do balance and vestibular issues, and then just general back pain, neck pain. But what we do in our clinic that's different, there's two things. We don't advertise or market physical therapy. We market directly to the consumer of our service, and to the specific needs, wants, and desires they have. So we help active people in Greensboro stay fit, healthy, and strong without pain meds, injections, or surgery. And that's like our main message. When people come in, they, before they come in, like if they call us, we'll ask them a certain series of questions. So about 40% of people call directly, 60% of people come in through our website, where they fill in like an application where it's like, what's your name? What's happened? How long has it been a problem? What's it keeping you from doing? What would you like to be doing instead? What service are you interested in? When's a good time to call you back? And so we start getting this kind of information from people. We bring them into a consultation, like a consultation. So it's a $75 total body diagnostic, where we look at people head to toe. We take them through like a quick screen, ask them some questions, touch them where they hurt, and give them a plan to solve their problem, which isn't their back pain or their shoulder issue. It's the fact that they can no longer go to CrossFit, and it's not even getting back to CrossFit or yoga. Is what does yoga help them do? It helps them feel strong, confident, and like a good role model for their kids. And so we give them here's your plan for that. And we'll then offer and sell the plan of care. So we'll sell the result they want, and like whatever we think is appropriate, whether it's an 8-week or 12-week program. And most people, a good 40% of people will pay in full. Another 40% of people will get on a payment plan or pay as you go. And then there's a good 20-30% of people who this isn't right for them because they thought their insurance was going to pay for all of it,
And you answered exactly how I was expecting, customized, right? That's what you do. And that's the uniqueness. And a lot of times with even in the chiropractic world, cash practices, we can be more customizing to our patients and serve them actually better in a non-insurance world rather than being in an insurance world. So
yeah, because the insurance tells you they're only going to pay you for certain things, or they're not going to pay for 2 units of X, Y, and Z, even though like we as doctors think that this is what our patients need, and to let them dictate the care, I don't think is serving our patients or as ethical as, it's not the ethical way,
No, totally. I mean, I always tell my patients, like, I'm not the doctor when you use your insurance. The insurance company is. And they're like, what do you mean by that? I'm like, well, you'll see. It may show up. They'll all of a sudden say, this is not medically necessary. And they're going to be like, but I need it. I'm like, I know you need it. But again, remember when I said I'm not the doctor? They are. Yep. And it's one of those things. That's why I was just curious to see where that went, because as I know I've had some of those experiences. Mm-hmm. So then how, you got the, customization side solid and so forth. Where does it come then to, branching yourself out? What marketing stuff have you done or like in those aspects to really shift gears? Because for me, I'm very intrigued when it comes to, I'm a PT, because I come from Illinois. PT is very embedded into the insurance world and so forth. How did you create a difference? How did you make that little niche for yourself to branch out that way?
Yeah, I think the first 2 things that we did that were critical was figuring out where my patients exist. And so they exist online and they exist out in public, but not at the physician's office and not really at any other healthcare provider's office, because healthcare providers, hospitals are going to say, well, you don't take their insurance, we won't send our patients to you. Even if I was the best person in town for that person, they wouldn't do it. And I still think that's ethically wrong. But so where else are patients? And so Google search was huge early on. Well, I mean, this is 13 years ago, maybe closer to 15, being the first person found on Google just for physical therapy was huge. I mean, Google still is a huge driver of new people to our practice. Through our reviews, we've got over 75 5-star Google reviews. We've written lots of blog posts. I've got over 1 million views on our YouTube channel for our clinic. So those kinds of things and doing that consistently over time has helped. The other big thing is being out in the community and doing in-person workshops for yoga studios or other like organizations at gyms, et cetera. Just knowing people working out there and people, oh, you got to ask Dr. LeBauer about this. Oh, you need to, and that's not just word of mouth, that's cultivating word of mouth. So not waiting for it to come, but actively cultivating and asking for word of mouth and getting out in the community and doing events and being in front of people.
Love that. I love that. Yeah. And that's I think that's sometimes the best marketing in itself right there.
Yeah.
Just being able to do those two things. And
Absolutely.
Even still to this day, Google still is a search engine that a ton of people use. So for all the entrepreneurs out there, definitely making sure you get up on those rankings. So let's shift gears here a little bit now. So you got the PT side, but now you're also coaching individuals. Let's talk a little bit about that. Break that down a little bit. Teaching people the model of what you've created and what has worked. And is that kind of where the process is?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is a lot of people say, who are you, like, especially early on, who are you to teach people how to do this? And who are, all the detractors and the, what do I call it? Like the dodo birds and dinosaurs. They're just like, who are you? And I'm like, who am I? I'm the one sharing the information. I'm just sharing. All I've done is share what I know. Most people don't think they should share what they know because they need to hold it close to their chest because someone else will figure it out and steal their success. And all I was doing was helping other people through internet forums and like LinkedIn groups at the time. And people said, so I had a couple people ask, and even a couple classmates. And I spent an hour on the phone with each of them. And then after a few weeks, said to my wife, he said, Andra, I gave them all the secrets and they didn't even say thank you. And she said, you know what? Don't give away anything for free when you expect something in return. And I was like, you're right. And I got on the next call. I think it was that afternoon or the next week, excuse me, with a woman who I didn't know. And she had asked, well, can I just ask you a few questions? And at the end of the call, she said, okay, Aaron, how much do I owe you? And I was like, what do you mean? How much do you owe me? And she said, well, this is extremely valuable. I want to pay you for your time. And she said, well, how much do you charge your patients? I'll pay you that. I was like, okay, great. So that day I just wrote down, okay, this is what I charge for coaching and consulting. And I'd already had like a blog, but that really made me understand that the information that I had to share was valuable. And so I've just kind of grown it since then mainly because I'm just sharing what I'm doing in my practice, what's working for me and helping people figure out how do they do it themselves. These days, that was more of I think I shared more of a, here's how to do it. And these days I'm more of a, let me help you get off the fence and be an outside eye to your business and help you grow it faster that way. But that's really how it got started.
I love that. And is it just PTs you work with, or there's a certain professions you help out?
Yeah, I mostly work with physical therapists because I am a physical therapist. We've had chiropractors, acupuncturists, physical therapist assistants, massage therapists, health coaches, and psychotherapists come through our programs. So, a wide range of people, mostly if you're like a fitness, health, or healing profession, a lot of things that we do like kind of resonate. But the things that I teach are general business principles and, online marketing strategies.
Love that. What's some of the challenges you see people facing that, or a common theme that you see in your working with your clients?
Yeah, the number one challenge people have is the strive for perfection, right? Especially with people who've been through grad school. Like in order to get into grad school, you have to pass a standardized test and you have to get A's. And even in PT schools, like if you were getting a C, like I could graduate from college with a C, but in PT school, if you were getting a C, that wasn't like a passing grade. Like you had to have B's. So it was a strive for perfection. But perfection in your business perfection is a business killer, and it's going to kill your business faster than anything else. 80% is good enough. And I said that to someone someday, and it just kind of stuck. And so now it's on like the back of our like shirts, and I've made stickers. And really 80% is all you need in business. And what that means is we want speed wins. And so the faster I can get something to market, the faster I can get my website out, my menu, my cards, et cetera, the sooner I can get results. The longer I wait, the more delays we'll have, the less people will help. And so the product or service or website or whatever the thing is, it just needs to be good enough. It just needs to be viable and work, and it needs to work. and then you start it and you come back and fix it later on. Because I think most people are afraid of putting out something that's not perfect and that they'll fail. But, it's like failure is not fatal, and we can just go down the road and always change course later on. But most people just sit on the fence the whole time and say, why don't I have results? And then they send nasty emails and go, who are you to do this? And I'm like, you're the one not doing it. That's really the big problem.
I love how you bring up the 80%. That's something I teach all the time. And when I have students in my office and they're interning or shadowing, and I had an intern one time, and she was, again, going to grad school and stuff, you're like this perfectionist. You got to get things done a certain way. And I remember she was spending so much time just creating a little content for us. And I looked and I said, you wasted how much time? I go, how much did I pay you for that? And she's like, what do you mean? You're saying this so mean. I'm like, I'm not being mean. I'm just curious. And so she told me, and I was like, listen, I'm going to give you a rule in life. If you master this now, you'll master it. You'll make your life so much, and I see a lot of me in her. And I was like that, where I had to be 100% and all this. Same thing. I just do an 80-20 rule. 80% of your work, as long as 80% satisfactory, go, move on, don't look back. And when I was writing my second book, I finally applied that into my life, because I wrote the book and I was like, had the editor look at it, and I was like, man, there's still mistakes we got to work through. And I'm like, you know what? Forget it. This is the book. This is what it is. If someone calls me out on it, they're not meant to read my book then. Right. That's not the person I want to read my book anyhow. If they're going to be nitpicking every little thing. Because there's people out there, they're going to do that too. But it's just something interesting how that 80-20 rule just applies in so many different avenues, and how it can work in so many different ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got spelling mistakes in my book, and the only reason we corrected them is because I got the logic wrong with training to explain some Medicare stuff. And so I had to correct the Medicare thing. We had to go back and do a revision, but I still left some things misspelled. So when people pointed out, I say, congratulations, you won, what would you like as your prize?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I would have people it's amazing what people will say, but it's interesting. So I'm getting ready to write my third one, and I'm like, and I was talking to a client about it, and they're like, so you talk a lot about just implementing, and you talk, like you're sharing, right? First to market, just get out there. Like I share about people, when I create a program, I don't have the program, but I'm marketing it. And they're like, wait a minute. And I'm like, well, because I want to get traction. Why am I going to build something and then sit and wait for people to come through? I'd rather have at least something done, like a little something, and then just market like crazy. And then once it's good to go, all right, I'm going to work now, and I'll figure it out as I go, and then I'll fine tune it later down the road, like he kind of said. And I think that's a lot of times, especially, in today's era, we're always trying to perfect, and realize that it doesn't have to be. I'm not saying you don't want your work to be good quality, but you do want it to be in some way. And this is in life in general, I think, too. You don't have to. Everything in your life doesn't have to be set to a certain stage. It could just be like, hey, what is the level of, what's your standard, right? And how do you want to play that, whatever that standard is, and then just let that be the bar, and then just work from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you said that you will sell your program before you build it, because that's exactly what I learned and teach. And I've seen two different people. One person spent $50,000 on recording a course, and another person spent like $30,000 on it. And they both struggled because they couldn't sell their program. They couldn't afford to pay they didn't think they could afford to pay for coaching. And, they just had a hard time, and they just went about it backwards. But that's the way we think it should be done. But that's not the way it works in business.
I wish I had this advice, and ingrained it in my head like 15 years ago, because I would have been so much different, because it was always like, well, I got to have it ready to go before this happens, or I have to have this. And now in my life, it's just, I'll literally, sometimes I'm on Facebook and I'll just be like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Who's interested? And next, I got hands coming up, and I'm going, all right, now I got work to do.
I know. I did that. I've done it where 8 times out of 10, you get crickets. And then once you'll get 100 or 200 replies, and you're like, oh man, dude, why didn't I didn't even prep the VA, or don't have a VA to do this. I'm like, oh, I got to deliver on something. And that's a good problem to have,
Always. I agree with you 100%. So we got the perfection side of things. What else do you see commonly shows up that is things that people need to, it's a common thing?
Yeah, I think there's the perfection. There's also people not setting big enough goals. People come in a lot of times and their goals are, this is patients and coaching clients. Their goals are just to get back to doing it's the standard, right? So when setting goals, I wouldn't say 80% is good enough. Setting goals, we need to have like a target and a realistic goal, right? I want something to shoot for, but something I'm happy to land on. And that happy to land on shouldn't just be replacing what I already have. Like, so for a business, a lot of people come in, their goals are just to replace their job. Well, then you're just building yourself a job. In your health, if it's like, hey, my back hurts, or I was told never to run again, I just need my knee or my back to stop hurting. But hey, if you want to run a marathon, I can help you do that, and people think that they shouldn't be striving for something bigger. And when we set big enough goals, and we're in tune with them, and we know exactly what we want and why it's important to us, then that's the thing that can motivate us to get up every morning at 5 a.m. when we have to work on our business before we take the kids to school. And it's the thing that can keep us going, because it's not only just a bigger goal, but it's a goal that's about something bigger than just us. It's bigger than just my bank account and my kids. It's about helping other people. And when it's clear and concise and has a timeline, it's something that makes it easier to just keep going, because I'm not hitting that goal. So for one of mine is to help 100 million people avoid expensive imaging and unnecessary surgery. But I can't do that alone. Now, 100 million people is a really large number. If other physical therapists I help work half as hard as me and see half as many patients I help, I still have to help 55,000 of them learn how to market directly to patients and build a business that's sustainable for 10 years, and I don't know if I can do that, but I can't do it by myself.
Well, that's the thing. I love that when sometimes, what is it? I think Tony Robbins says we overestimate what we can do in a year, or underestimate what we can do in 5 years, or something like that.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things where, one of my programs that I do, I always tell people, I'll help you double your profits in 6 months. And a lot of people go, that sounds way too good to be true. How's that possible? That's crazy. And I'm like, well, it has happened, but it's again, looking at, well, what kind of goals you want to create? What is the process to it? It can be done. I've done it multiple times, but it can be done. But it's one of those things where there's a lot of work. There's the clarity, the vision, all these other things. But looking at like goals in that aspect, I love how you said you want to help. 100 million people?
100 million people.
Love that, man. It's one of those things where you have to have those big goals. There's one of my mentors. He was like, I have a Nobel Peace Prize. I wrote it when I was 20 something years old. I'm like, Nobel Peace Prize. He goes, one day his goal is to reach 1 billion people to help. And I don't know if he's there yet, but he's been doing it for a very long time. And it's one of those things where it's like, have those audacious goals to really like shake you up. I always say, if you, when I work with clients and then we're working on goal stuff for the year, and they're like, oh, I want to do this and this. I'm like, okay, that sounds great, because I'm listening to their tone and energy. But I'm always like, how about if we do this instead? Or how about we triple that? Oh, I don't, man, that. And I'm like, yes, that's what I want. I want you to hesitate. I want that, like, oh, man, that's crazy. And it's like, who cares if you don't get it? Sometimes you may get close. Like and I think that's more important than the setting the bar so low where you're like, I'm always hitting my goals. I always feel good.
Right. Yeah. One of the mistakes I made early on in my coaching business was letting people keep their really small goals. I had one client who was one of the first people to say yes. And I was like, wow, she said yes. Like that was, to $1,500 a month. And after month 2, she was like, all right, I'm ready to quit. And I was like, well, what's up? She's like, well, I already, met my goals. Like I'm already making my $4,000 a month and I have 2 days off a week. And I'm like, but that was, I was like, okay, like, don't you want to set bigger goals? But like, I didn't have the ability early on to be able to, hey, no, okay, that goal is like a short-term goal. Let's set a bigger goal. What do you really want for your life? And part of that's the questions you ask in the sales process and how do you frame what this is all about? And I've gotten better at that because people need to be stretched and they need to see what's possible next.
Totally. I mean, if we're not stretching in any way, shape, or form, we're not living the life we really want to desire to live.
Absolutely.
I love that. So we got the perfection side, the goal side. Any other wonderful tips you don't mind sharing and that people struggle with when working with them?
Yeah, I think it's, I think it probably comes back to the ego, but the ego is not the problem. The ego is kind of like part of the issue. The problem is people thinking they're the only ones that can do it. Right. So I'm the only one that can treat this patient. I'm the only one that can write this sales page or email, or I have to be the one that does everything. Well, as a business owner, that becomes like the choke point, or we become the bottleneck, thinking that we have to be the one that does everything. And part of delegation, so we have to be able to delegate these things off our plate. So part of it is letting go of the outcome and knowing that if they get it, if they can do it 80% as good as me, great. But it's understanding that my time is more valuable than money. And if I want to value my time, I need to be spending my time on the things that only I can do. Like creating big deals and creating the vision and creating content, not editing videos and posting to social media, or even in our clinic, like I don't treat patients anymore, and I definitely don't answer the phones. So it took a while for me to figure out how do I do that. But once I did it and realized that I needed to do it, it allowed me to start doubling and tripling and 10xing my income and my impact, because I have more time to help more people rather than getting stuck in the weeds, doing work that I can pay someone else $15, $30, even $50 an hour to do.
Totally. I think that's one thing that I think entrepreneurs in general, business owners in general, just need to learn to master more. Like, what are the things you enjoy, or what's your biggest money makers, and then that's your job, and then all the other stuff you don't like to do, or you just don't. It's tedious stuff that it doesn't really generate money. Have someone else do.
Yeah. And, Vic, there's another thing that just popped in my head about what our ego keeps us from doing. A lot of times our ego keeps us from asking for help because you're smart, right? You went to grad school, you have a degree, you got a DR period in front of your name, but you absolutely can do it on your own. You're smart enough to figure it out. But if someone could help give you the shortcut, why wouldn't you take the shortcut? And so a lot of times what I'm doing with my coaches, I have coaches and I'm in a mastermind group, and it's about speed for me. So I don't have to make the same mistakes other people have made. I can get to my result faster. Even if I could figure it out, or even show up to my coaching call and have the right answer, the fact that someone who's ahead of me says, yeah, do that, that's the right answer. It's like, okay, cool. I don't have to think about it longer. I can just now go take action and get big results from it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so key, and I think sometimes people miss out. Like when it comes to, like I always tell people, you need a coach. Everyone needs a coach, and whatever you do. And you just brought up a great point on that, because it's one of those things where it's like, I have someone who I can just get the answer to. I don't have to think about it. You're not wasting energy. You're not creating distractions. You're not, pulling yourself away where you're losing that energy, which means you can't create your reality faster. And just be like, hey, coach, this is where I'm at. I'll do this, and you'll be good. That's what I thought. Thank you. Appreciate that. And then it's like, boom, let me get back in. Let me get recentered. Let me get refocused. Let me hammer this stuff out.
Right. And that's exactly, when I started my cash practice right out of PT school, everyone said, oh, you have to have experience. I'm like, I do have experience, but I don't have I didn't have differential diagnosis experience. Right. So I would call up one of my clinical instructors, like, hey, I got a patient with this is what I'm thinking. He's like, you're right. That's what I would do. I'm like, okay, cool. It was the same thing. And, that was super helpful. And so I think it is about valuing our time and recognizing how do I cheat time? It's by getting the cheat codes, and the cheat code in business is working with a business coach or mentor. The cheat code in clinical practice is working with a clinical mentor, and it's the same thing, and it helps our clients and patients get better results faster.
I always tell people in the podcast here, our community, and just on Facebook and stuff too, when I talk about like having a coach for stuff, I always tell them, like, I have a background of nutritional experience and stuff. I self-taught until I got into chiropractic school and all that, and I went really deep into it. And my patients sometimes will ask, like, so much about nutrition. Do you work on yourself with it then? I'm like, no, never. They're like, what do you mean? But all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, I know a lot, but I have a friend of mine who is a chiropractor, and he's very in-depth in nutrition. I pick his brain and say, hey, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm thinking. You tell me what I need to do, and what plan would you recommend, and how should I shift gears? Or here's my issue, and this is what I'm trying to get better with. Tell me, here's things I thought of. What do you recommend? And I'll follow whatever you tell me. And because he's like my coach, and I'm his coach in those kind of ways too. So when he has nutrition demands or stuff like that, he always comes to me with it. Here's what I've been trying, or here's what I've been doing, and so forth. And I tell people it's because you got to have. There's things, we learned very early on that the doctor who treats himself is only but a fool. And I remember when I was in chiropractic school listening to that, I said, I will never doctor myself, no matter what. May it be, even when I go to a chiropractor, I just had to switch because I moved to Knoxville now, and I had to find a new chiro. And I told him straightforward, I'm like, I know a lot. I'm very good at what I do, but here's the thing. You're my doctor. I'm your patient. That's the relationship I want to have with you. If I have something I'm concerned, I'll tell you what I think, but I want you to make the decision and you tell me what I need to do. And he was just like, this is different. And I'm like, yes, because you need to be my chiropractor. I cannot be like just telling you, hey, do this, and that's it.
Oh, and treating healthcare providers in our practice is dependent upon because of that, because they don't let us be the doctor. They don't let us help. So.
No, totally. So one of the things you mentioned earlier, I didn't mention this to you, but like having ADHD. So I was never diagnosed with ADHD, but going to chiropractic school, and I have a 50% pediatric practice. I've seen ADHD and I go, holy crap, that's me. Every poster child. That was me growing up. How are things that you handle these things? I love always asking people this to that generation, because there's gifts to being ADHD. There's a beautiful, and when I work with kids and parents on this, I always tell them we're going to work on maximizing the gifts and minimizing the negative. And so how do you balance everything with that?
Yeah, I think the biggest gift or superpower, and I call it, is being able to see solutions to problems other people can't. Right. It's like, whether it's in your body or in your business, or, I try not to do it in my relationship too much. I try not to tell my kids and my wife, this is how you solve your problem. But really, it's just being able to see different solutions to problems that most people think they have to keep walking straight. And I'm like, oh, just walk around the corner. You'll see the other door. But for me, it is recognizing, okay, there's a superpower and a gift to this. So how do I minimize the negatives? I think the thing is, I probably get a lot of anxiety. Like if I start something and I know I can't complete it, I won't start it. Right. Because I'll either let myself down or let someone else down. So I don't do a lot of things. As I've gotten older, I've been more comfortable looking at my done list rather than my to-do list. So I make a list of all the things I need to do. The important stuff rises to the top. The 10x problems, the things that are going to make the most money, help the most people. The small things, the great ideas, the squirrels, they kind of fall to the bottom, and I never do them. But if I want to look at what have I done, I go look at the done list, all the things I've checked off. So I make lists. I live it like my calendar. If it's not on my Google Calendar, it's not happening. And so my wife will say, hey, we've got this thing. I was like, but it's not on the calendar. I'm like, of course I didn't think it was happening. And then I have to have other people around me who are really good and organized and kind of really help, in the business. Okay, if I have an idea, can I pass it off to someone else and they can implement the project? But if I can write down clearly, and I've been working on this lately, it's not just, hey, here's the project. It's I have to say, here's the project and idea. Here's what success looks like. Here's this kind of 6 parts of the project and the 3 steps to get started, and kind of name who it is on there. And then I can start to hand off things that I don't have to do. So Aaron can do a lot, but not Aaron does most of it.
Smart. I love it. Yeah. The other thing is I learned over time is, one of the things ADHD kiddos are just, we have in general is that we have a bigger bandwidth of information processing or higher IQ. So a lot of times we'll process things and get it. And we're like, okay, yep, good. Or when you're in conversation, when people are talking, you can think and listen and process where they're coming from, where they're knowing the go and everything. And people will be like, it's just funny when it comes to those things. But real quick, I have another question then. How are you in sports?
It depends. I'm not
play sports.
I do. Yeah. I raced bicycles. I was a semi-professional cyclist. So I was a category 1. If anyone knows cycling, it was the top amateur level. We raced 8% of the time with pros. And I raced in Europe, and I was really good at endurance sports, and I'm good at just kind of pushing hard and far. Wasn't really good at ball sports. I was okay at soccer in high school and got better at basketball as I got into college, but it was never something where I shined. But I think the number one thing that no one can be good or bad at is yoga and movement, and even kettlebell training. So that's what I prefer these days.
Love it. Now, I only bring that up because a lot of ADHD, I say kiddos just because that's what I practice with, but it's sports is something they're good at. Now, it doesn't have to be all sports. It can but it's whatever sport they're in, they're very, and a lot of my ADHD, when I'm working with ADHD kids who are teenagers, they're usually in multiple sports and they're good at each of them. Like it's not like just one. They really excel at what they do, and it's one of those things where it's just multitasking, taking information, processing things, and doing that. But I love how you brought up though. Everyone can be, you don't have to, be good at certain with yoga or kettlebell training or stuff like that, which is true, and that is in itself that's a task on itself and helps out massively with your health. So
Yep. Well, I think and going back to like sports and ADHD, I think a lot of it is it's getting physical, tactile input and having to concentrate super hard on something. Like for me, it's like this is the thrill-seeking behavior. Like for my brother, but my brother also raced bikes, so it's like, can you ride downhill, at 45 miles an hour, going around a corner that if you fell off, you would definitely be in the hospital, and you have to focus so hard. So a lot of what it does is it forces you to focus, which is calming, because there's not 1,000 things going through your brain. You have to really focus on what you're doing in that task. And it's like I can actually be calm because there's only one thing to focus on. It's going around the corner or riding down between cars in downtown San Francisco as a bike messenger. It's like, good. That feels great to me,
No, I love how you brought that up because you have to have that mental stimulation, exhaustion, and energy. But it's really just because I played baseball and sometimes that would get boring for me, especially like hitting or in the outfield. Until I started getting chiropractic care, I was able to focus a lot harder and better at that. But like soccer and racquetball and basketball, and I used to play football with my friends every weekend. We play tackle, like the high impact stuff. Man, that was like that was like my zen. And I didn't know it until later because it was like one of the things where I couldn't play anymore. I was going to undergrad for school and then getting into chiropractic school, and I didn't play much sports. And I was like, why is it that like when I play sports, I'm calmer? I just don't understand. And then as I was going through chiropractic school, I started going, oh crap, I might have been ADHD. Man, that explains I needed that focus. I needed I needed that. And so then I tried to incorporate some sport of a high demand to do that. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's so true in so many ways. Aaron, real quick before we wrap up, how can people connect with you, find you, what you're up to, what you're doing, and all that good stuff? Get your book and all that.
Yeah, the best place to find me is probably Instagram at Aaron LeBauer, or you can hit my website, aaronlebauer.com. And if you're like, how do I spell that again? It's with a B, but just go to Google, put in Aaron LeBauer, and you'll hit all my websites and social medias, LeBauer.
And for all the listeners, I will have that in the show notes. Aaron, this was fun. Great to connect, get to know you a little better. And thank you for taking the time to share what you know and what you experience and all that good stuff with our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely, Vic. Thanks for having me again.